The Carolina Hurricanes, one of the most hyped up and disappointing teams of the 2023-24 season, are back with a vengeance, trying to get the monkey off their back after losing a ton of talent in free agency over the offseason. Can the Canes maintain their elite regular season play with the talent they managed to retain? And more importantly, when it comes time for the playoffs, is that talent going to be enough to get the Hurricanes back on track to make a deep playoff run that seems long overdue?
I admit it. Last year was rough.
The Hurricanes were a juggernaut last season, both in terms of the analytics, the play on the ice, and public perception. They were seen to be one of the best teams in the East. Between them, the Panthers and the Rangers are the most dominant. Going head-to-head with the Rangers for a division title was a tough battle, which the Hurricanes did ultimately lose, but it was fairly close. They only missed out on the top seed in the Eastern Conference and the President's Trophy by 3 points, and actually had more regulation wins than the New York Rangers. Not bad for a team that was also missing its starting goaltender for most of the season. In round 1 of the playoffs, they faced off against the New York Islanders in a series that almost everybody expected them to win easily, and they went on to win quite easily. Yes, there were a few hiccups, and the Hurricanes had to pull out a few late-game heroics in order to take a few games early in the series, but ultimately the Hurricanes took down the Islanders in 5 games. That set up a matchup of the Titans in the East, as the Hurricanes had to fly back to New York to take on the President's Trophy winning New York Rangers. Although it seemed like a series that Carolina should be a bit favored to win, just given the analytics and puck possession numbers, in the playoffs it ultimately comes down to who has the hot goalie, and that was Igor Shesterkin. The dude was absolutely lights out, and even though the Carolina Hurricanes outplayed the Rangers for most of the series, they just couldn't get pucks past Shesty, and thus lost the first 3 games in brutally tight fashion. After storming back and taking the next 2, it looked like the Carolina Hurricanes might actually have a chance to force a Game 7 when they jumped down on top of the Rangers early in Game 6 at home. But then the clock struck midnight. Everybody remembered that the Carolina Hurricanes are not Cinderella, but rather one of the duchesses who just face-planted when getting out of their carriage before the ball, and the Rangers stormed back to take the lead and ultimately the game, downing the Carolina Hurricanes in 6 games and leading to an offseason full of question marks. One of those biggest question marks is behind the bench. Rob Brind'Amour is back, and he's got a brand new contract, which means he is very firmly in the gotta prove it era of his coaching tenure. We know he's a good regular season coach. He's won a Coach of the Year award, but the guy has yet to get his team to an appearance in the Stanley Cup. It isn't like he's been absent of great playoff runs. They've made the conference finals twice in his tenure, and ownership in Carolina clearly believes in his talent. The question that's going to be rightfully asked about Brind'Amour is whether that's his ceiling, and if he has it in him to outmaneuver the elite coaches in those critical games when the pressure is really on.
You're a star, you're on top, somebody bring you some hair. You should kill yourself.
It's really kind of shocking to me how Sebastian Aho just does not get more praise for how good he is. I mean, this is a guy who's coming off of 3 straight 35-goal seasons, while also being one of the best defensive centers in the entire NHL, and people talk about him like he's just some run-of-the-mill second-line center. He's just one of those guys that does so many little things well, and he's an analytics darling, but I'm just hoping at some point people are going to wake up and see that Aho deserves to be mentioned in the same breath as a lot of other top 10 centers in the NHL.
Oh, this guy again.
Going along Aho on the top line, we start with Andrei Svechnikov, here to do a bunch of Michigan goals and pick up a bunch of empty calorie points. Unlike Aho, I think Svechnikov is a bit overrated because of the skill that he flashes in a lot of highlights, but this is getting paid almost $8 million a year, and he's never hit 70 points in his career, despite the fact that he's playing with an elite center in Sebastian Aho. Now, speaking of big contracts, on the other wing, Seth Jarvis just inked his big extension at $7.42 million a year for 8 years over the offseason. It's a big number for a guy who's never hit 70 points in his career, but at least I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, as opposed to guys like Byfield, Beniers, and Slavkovsky, in that his lowest point total of a season was 39 points. His underlying analytics may not support this contract right now, but I don't think the bust potential on this contract is as big as it is for some of the other forwards who signed big-time extensions and haven't proven it yet. Behind them on the second line, Jack Roslovic has crossed enemy lines after playing for the Rangers in that playoff series last year, along with Marty Necas, another guy who surprisingly gets overlooked on this team despite the fact that he's a consistent 25-50 point guy who's an excellent distributor of the puck. Unfortunately, the two of them are going to be saddled by their center, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, aka the NHL's cautionary tale about RFA offer sheets. Thank God the money is not that bad, bad at $4.25 million a year, but having a guy who appears to have peaked at 30 to 40 points locked up for another 5 years, despite getting big minutes on an extremely talented offensive team like the Hurricanes, not exactly the best move by the Hurricanes. On the third line, Captain Jordan Staal continues the legacy of the most boring brothers in the NHL leading the Carolina Hurricanes, while on his sides, Jordan Martinook is here to play the exact same style of game as Jordan Staal, with the exception being that Martinook actually has the ability to skate faster than a Zamboni. Will Carrier will round out that third line coming over from Vegas, a guy who's actually been on the ice with the Stanley Cup in the building more than once, in fact. The fourth line is a mix of big physical nasty guys like Brendan Lemieux, Sparkplug Jack Drury, and the speedy Tyson Jost. On the defensive side for the Carolina Hurricanes, it's big last dance vibes here. Their number one defenseman Jacob Slavin is on the last year of his deal, and at age 30 is probably going to be seeking one last shot at the bag for his career, so it's unclear whether Carolina is going to be able to make it work to bring him back for another year. Very solid defensively, even though he's not a guy who's overly physical. Slavin is now the Hurricanes' de facto number one defenseman, especially now that Brady Shea's gone, and he'll be bared by walking Cro-Magnon Brent Burns. I swear to God, this Wookiee's been 1 year away from retirement for the last 5 years. At some point, he's either got to walk away for the game, or we got to take him out there and have a little ceremony with the big Stanley Cups just so he thinks he's won a Stanley Cup and can walk off into the sunset. On the second pairing, Dmitry Orlov only has 1 year left on his short-term deal. He's probably gone after this year. His partner, Jalen Chatfield, is good and actually projects to be here for a couple more years after this, so that's something that the Hurricanes can build off of. On the third pairing, the underrated Shane Gostisbehere as the Tony DeAngelo replacement, but without the toxicity. So already Ghost is looking like a fantastic upgrade there. Finally, Sean Walker inked to a new 5-year deal. You know, for a team that's so analytically inclined as Carolina, I would think that they would know the basic lesson of don't overpay a player based on one outlier year, but hey, Sean Walker's agent is getting a nice fruit basket for his efforts. In goal, hopefully the Hurricanes will be getting a full year of Freddie Anderson, who looked lights out when he was returning from injury. Unfortunately, that play didn't continue into the playoffs, but if he can be solid and the Hurricanes don't run into a goaltender who's so hot he could cause a nuclear meltdown, they should be fine. His backup, Peter Kochetkov, will actually probably be getting a larger share of the minutes this year, so it'll be interesting to see how he plays it with a larger sample size.
Christmas time!
Oh, Britta's in this?
The Hurricanes have a very solid core, so they didn't really need to do much other than add pieces around the edge to augment it. Jack Roslovic on the middle six is a great buy low candidate. He's been inconsistent throughout his career, but he's also been on some pretty untalented teams like the Columbus Blue Jackets, so putting him in a situation where he can beat off a more talented line mates might be just the thing to get him going, which is exactly why Brind'Amour is pairing him up with just Barry Cook and Yimmy. That's going to work out brilliantly for everybody. The other big out up front was Will Carrier, another middle six forward, this one who's actually been on teams that have accomplished something in the playoffs, but otherwise just a plugger, not a ton of offensive pop, but he's got a great motor and a great effort guy.
That's not bad.
It's not even that I like a guy whose biggest flaw is being a bit too selfless, but Marty Necas is one of the best puck-moving forwards that I have seen in quite a long time, and it's a shame that he's only the third or fourth best forward on his team. I think this guy's got enough talent to be a consistent 70-80 point player, especially with the guys around him to feed off of, but his mentality, unfortunately, is just not that much of an alpha. He needs another guy on his line to be the guy that demands that the play go through. That's why I think him and Svechnikov are a pretty good wing duo, but I understand Rob Brind'Amour's decision to kind of break the two of them up so that you don't have all of your best players loaded up onto one line. But Necas has proven to be a guy with a very high floor. He's going to get you at least 40 points a year. I just really wish that he had the opportunity to unlock himself and hit his ceiling, which could be an 80-point player.
The Gambletron 2000 says the winner is Cincinnati by 200 points. Why, you worthless hunk of junk?
I think the Hurricanes are still one of the best teams in the East, but I don't think that they're the upper echelon like I had them projected last year. Unfortunately, losing a guy like Brady Shea and Teuvo Teravainen is gonna hurt the Hurricanes. Replacing them with guys like Jack Roslovic, it's good given the cap constraints that were on them, but make no mistakes, this is a team that is poised for a step back from what they were last year. I think they're still a for sure playoff team. I just don't know if I can put them as the number one team in the Metro Division, which they were close to being last year. I think the gap between them and the Rangers has gotten bigger, and they're going to be fighting off teams like the Devils to try and get that home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs, rather than fighting for home ice throughout.
The Canes are the Maple Leafs of the conference finals, always getting swept.
Man, I really wish you stopped Don from playing off a sheet.
The only good thing the Canes have done is bring back the old Hartford Whalers jersey.